Hello, you fine folk! So Overwatch 2 has finally arrived, and with it, its new character Kiriko that is kind of on everyone's mind right now has received an animated short all for herself. I think this video has, for many people including me, been a reminder of just how good these Overwatch animated shorts were. Like, there were so many of them at the beginning and they were crazy good, but their frequency kind of dropped when Overwatch went on hiatus. So, since I'm still recovering from some of the after effects of my COVID infection and I'm having a lot of trouble working on my bigger projects because of it, let's talk a little bit about what makes this short so effective, shall we? As a quick side note, the animation of the short is obviously gorgeous as well, but since I'm not an animator and don't know a ton about the process of animating either, this video will only focus on the storytelling aspects here, so the characterization of the introduced characters, mostly Kiriko since she's an eponymous protagonist, as well as some of the visual storytelling tools that I use to emphasize the story, its characters, and their relationships. So, let's jump right into it. The very first scene and therefore an introduction to our protagonist Kiriko. You need to nail that first impression of that character if you want such a short piece of writing to be effective, so let's stop and think for a second. What does this scene tell us about Kiriko? The soft swaying from one side to another presents her as playful and carefree, and if you've seen more of this short or know anything about Kiriko, you'll know that is pretty accurate to the character she is. However, with her just coming home, I think we can also infer that she's probably content, happy. At least I can't imagine someone unsatisfied with their living situation returning home like this. And I think that's a crucial point giving context to some of the scenes later, so let's just keep that in mind.
Hi, Mr. Yoshida.
Oh, hi, Kiriko. Donuts for dinner again?
These aren't just any donuts. They're Fox Festival donuts with spirit sprinkles. Wanna try one?
No, thank you. But I hope you and your mother enjoy them.
She's here. Ugh. Let me guess. She brought her vacuum.
Yep.
And immediately we are introduced to our next character, Mr. Yoshida. From the way he is presented with the uniform and the ladder, it is made quite obvious that he is the janitor of the apartment building Kiriko lives in, even though it is never explicitly stated. From their interaction, we can gather that they seem to be pretty familiar. After all, they know their respective names and their interactions are immediately playful and casual, no formalities needed. Additionally, as we'll see in a second, Kiriko is also already familiar with his granddaughter, further establishing their good relationship. From what happens later on, we know that Kiriko seems to have moved in here only recently, so her being on such good terms with the apartment building's janitor establishes quite well that she seems to have fit right in. If this is how she interacts with the janitor, we can only imagine how she might interact with her neighbors, and that gives us the feeling that Kiriko is very much at home here, has found a place to belong, and this is going to be very significant later on.
You know, someone came to work with me today. And she's very excited to see you.
The next scene, of course, has Kiriko interact with Mr. Yoshida's granddaughter. There's immediately something interesting happening here. Mr. Yoshida claims that his granddaughter is excited to see Kiriko again, so it's somewhat surprising that she hasn't reacted to Kiriko's arrival at all. However, when Kiriko sits down to talk to her, that is immediately explained. His granddaughter appears to be deaf, which explains why she didn't notice Kiriko's arrival. Keep this setup in mind, her drawing on the floor and therefore not being able to be aware of her surroundings at all, because it'll appear again later in a much more unpleasant way. This is, of course, immediately great disability representation that we can definitely appreciate, but it's also used in some interesting ways, since whenever she interacts with Kiriko, the whole short becomes more quiet. Usually the slow and quiet musical leitmotif of the short, as well as Kiriko saying out loud what she is signing, are the only sounds in the scene, and that's also the case here.
Hey there, little rabbit. You're getting so good at that. Oh, but of course. Ooh, I've got something for you.
Again, Kiriko is being very playful. Intentionally misidentifying the fox mask during the Fox Festival, playing around with the stuffed animal she gifts to the girl, and just generally being cute and fun. The short immediately plays with our hearts, and it won't be the last time.
Aww.
How do I look?
It's also noticeable that this is the origin of the headwear that is a permanent part of Kiriko's design, a present from Mr. Yoshida's granddaughter, and the fact that she keeps wearing it after that shows that Kiriko doesn't just pretend to care here, but these people are actually important to her. It establishes just how much the people of this neighborhood mean to her, which makes it much more believable that she would put herself at risk to protect them.
Well, I should get going. See you later, little fox. Mr. Yoshida, pray for me.
So, before we head into the first scene with Kiriko's mother, we need to point out that it has been hinted at, albeit playfully, that Kiriko's relationship with her mother seems to be somewhat strained. With what we've seen of the character so far, which is playfulness, happiness, kindness, we naturally tend to sympathize with Kiriko here, and are far more likely to take her side in whatever the problem in the relationship is. However, let's still take a look at how Kiriko's mother is presented in that very first scene.
Mom! You're here! Kiriko, it's not safe here anymore. Just last week, someone in this building was robbed at gunpoint. You should never have moved out!
Well, not exactly very likable, that's for sure. There's no greeting at all here, no indication that this is the first time she sees Kiriko in a while, no hug, nothing we would expect from a loving mother. Instead, she immediately starts burying Kiriko with problems and accusations, and it very much feels like the real problem is that last line there. You should never have moved out. The danger might still be an aspect, but that appears more as a pretense for the real issue of her not being supportive of Kiriko living on her own. Visually, this scene is interesting because the donut boxes are used as a barrier to intensify how distant these characters are, by manifesting their emotional distance through an actual physical object separating them. This is only emphasized by the fact that Kiriko uses them to kind of hide from her mother, and as soon as she does that,
I brought you groceries.
her mother takes them away. The subtext here is very much, you can't hide from me, you can't hide from this confrontation.
Mom, you're overreacting.
I'm not overreacting. Please, tell me this is not your dinner.
And also her mother immediately jumps on every opportunity to criticize Kiriko's way of living, further establishing the real problem here. The fact that she brought her groceries and brought her vacuum just further highlights that she doesn't think Kiriko can take care of herself. But seriously, donuts for dinner? Just donuts? I get that it's cute and all, but Kiriko's mother might have a point there.
Kiriko.
Mom, look at me! I am totally protected by the fox spirit, just like Grandma was.
The barriers are used here quite effectively again. For the rest of the conversation, the table is always between these two characters, again creating an obstacle representing their emotional distance. Additionally, her mother at multiple points turns her back on Kiriko while she is talking, which visually tells us that she doesn't care about what Kiriko has to say here all that much.
Your grandmother is gone, and I will not lose you too.
And here we get the real reason why she probably doesn't want Kiriko to stay here. Apparently her grandmother has recently passed away, and the grief has led her mother to worry about losing Kiriko as well.
But Mom, the fox spirit can block bullets and balance your blood sugar. She's an all-purpose kind of spirit. All-purpose. Like flour. Which makes donuts.
You know I have a sword, right?
In these following parts of the scene, we can see some pretty realistic portrayals of incredibly ineffective communication. So, after her mother has brought her grandmother into the conversation, Kiriko is still being surprisingly playful and humorous. I think here she's very much using her humor as a defense mechanism. I simply won't take you seriously until you go away, so I also will not have to actually engage with the problem. That's what Kiriko's trying to do here, I think. However, her mother knows how to break that defense mechanism quite effectively.
I'm fine. I'm so safe.
You know, I stay up all night worrying about you. You've stopped training with me. Kanezaka's falling apart, and I don't know how to protect you. Faith alone isn't enough, Kiriko.
She's being vulnerable. However, I think this is actually not real vulnerability here. Especially when we consider how she acts when she's actually being vulnerable later on in the short, as well as what happens next. I'm personally reading this as a bit of manipulation here. There's definitely some truth to what she's saying, but I think the main motivation here is to break Kiriko's humorous defense and get her to be vulnerable, and we can see her doing exactly that in the following part of the scene.
Mom, you may not believe in the fox spirit, or what Grandma taught me, but believe in me. I'm stronger than you think.
So Kiriko has opened up, has shown vulnerability as well, and her mother reacts to that with a crushing answer.
Are you?
While Kiriko responds to her mother's vulnerability with empathy and vulnerability of her own, her mother reacts to her vulnerability by questioning everything she has said and questioning Kiriko herself. And then, suddenly, a new part of the plot is introduced. Have you ever seen any bigger posers than these guys? From the way they are presented, it's obvious that's exactly what they are. Bullies that aren't actually a real threat once you've got someone willing and able to oppose them. However, the people they are preying upon are Mr. Yoshida and his granddaughter. I've kept this for this scene in particular, but we need to talk about the choices of characters here. An old man and a young girl. Very much people not able to defend themselves, people that we are easily able to sympathize with, and that dehumanize the Hashimoto when they prey on them, because we immediately view them as helpless. They're the perfect people for Kiriko to protect, and do so much work in subtly making us sympathetic toward them that other character choices simply couldn't do. Yep, and here we have the scene I've alluded to earlier. Seeing her not able to notice the goon coming until he's right in front of her is just heartbreaking, especially when you notice the exact parallel to Kiriko's arrival earlier.
Do you know how ridiculous you sound? Oh, don't worry, Mom. I'm protected by an imaginary animal spirit who turns tortoise into vitamins.
Back to Kiriko and her mom, and back to horrible conversation skills. At this point, Kiriko's mother is just letting the complaints rain on her daughter. It has transformed into a monologue instead of an actual conversation by now. And it's made so obvious so effectively how little both of these people actually pay attention to the other person through what they are doing in the scene. Kiriko isn't looking at her mother, starts eating, and then is distracted by the noise in the hallway. She's definitely not present for this conversation. And her mother, with her back turned towards Kiriko doing the dishes, doesn't notice at all that Kiriko's attention is somewhere completely different. These are two characters completely unable, and probably also a little unwilling, to relate to the other person, and it shows in the way they communicate.
Your son owes us a lot of money.
I already told you, I don't know where he is.
You think this is a game? You think the fox spirit is gonna protect you? We are Hashimoto-san!
Of course, the Hashimoto are presented as extremely dislikable with the way they treat these two characters, again emphasized by their helplessness, but it's also so telling of their arrogance that their leader calls the old Mr. Yoshida son, a line that's going to appear again later as well.
Would it kill you to eat a vegetable?
Oh, that short moment where Mr. Yoshida tries to pretend that everything is okay to his granddaughter, because she can't even tell what's going on because she can't follow the conversation. Of course she can tell that something is wrong from non-verbal features alone, but the attempt is so heartbreaking.
Pickles! Anything I just want what's best for you, Kiriko. Kiriko?
I'm gonna kick every one of you in the face.
What? No one threatens the Hashimoto!
Wait, I don't want to get kicked in the face. I'm gonna call for backup.
What?
This is what I meant earlier. They're presented as complete pushovers. Once Kiriko arrived, they're not much of a threat. Well, at least not to her. If you didn't notice, there's also a pretty nice reference here, since the guy that wants to call backup is the very same person that tries to do so in the Hanzo and Genji short, and fails about as miserably there as he does here. It's also noticeable that the Hashimoto fight with wild abandon, while Kiriko fights in a calculated, tactical manner. It makes it obvious that Kiriko has been trained very well, and when we consider that she was trained by her mother, as we know from her origin story, maybe she can appreciate her mother's training here a little more. The heartbeat, the muffled screaming of Mr. Yoshida's granddaughter in the background, with the stark contrast to her usually quiet demeanor, it's just so well executed, and it kills me every time.
Where? Hashimoto. Son?
And here the line from earlier is repeated. It was used earlier to signify the Hashimoto's arrogance, and it is used this way here again, but with a much darker twist.
You, Hashimoto, have preyed on this city, this neighborhood, these people, for too long. I have a message for you to take back to your boss. Kanezaka is under my protection.
This is the scene that cements Kiriko as a protector. Not just because she literally says the neighborhood is under her protection, but I think the righteous anger with which she reacts to the Hashimoto almost killing Mr. Yoshida works extremely well for that type of character. I love this scene. It's obviously supposed to be merely comedic in nature, but I think you can actually draw a deeper meaning from this as well. These quote-unquote helpless people, as we've identified them as earlier, now are the ones to push the Hashimoto back. It establishes that Kiriko doesn't just protect the people of her neighborhood, but she gives them the strength to protect themselves. The fact that the short isn't afraid to show how much these characters care about each other, the raw emotion that is present in every single one of those scenes, it's one of the main reasons why this short hits so hard. Again, the musical leitmotif, the quietness, and a callback to how the stuffed toy was introduced earlier. This time though, the stuffed toy isn't what's being hugged, but Kiriko rather gets her just reward for her actions. It's also very cute how this callback to the toy is used. Mr. Yoshida and his granddaughter were understandably scared at first, having seen Kiriko's powers, but the callback reminds them that Kiriko is still the same person she was when she arrived earlier.
Are you okay? Such a brave little fox. Keep your eyes on this one. She's growing up so quickly.
Now that's an almost motherly thing to say, isn't it? I think the worry Kiriko felt when she saw Mr. Yoshida and his granddaughter being attacked made her more sympathetic to the worry of her mother, and made her understand her actions a little better. The particular phrase here is also interesting. Keep your eyes on this one, she's growing up so quickly. She probably sees herself in the little girl and is probably referring as much to herself as to Mr. Yoshida's granddaughter. She, as well, grew up very quickly, perhaps faster than her mother would have liked, but she can now appreciate someone like her mother keeping an eye on her. She now realizes that's what she's been trying to do. And that's probably the reason why she acts so differently when she returns. The B-plot with the Hashimoto is used to give Kiriko the character development needed to resolve the A-plot with her mother.
Thank you, Kiriko.
Kiriko.
Of course, she's not the only one who's gained a new understanding of the other person through that plot, because her mother was watching and saw that Kiriko is definitely able to not just protect herself, but others as well. She doesn't just realize that Kiriko really is stronger than she thinks, like Kiriko said herself earlier, but it also shows her the relationships she has built in this new environment.
Mom?
You're hurt.
Oh. I'll be okay.
Notice how different the setup is compared to earlier. No barriers separating these two, and also the whole composition is reversed. Earlier, Kiriko was closer to the entrance while her mother was further into the apartment, and now it's the other way around. It shows that these characters now understand the other one's position and their point of view, and are able to relate to each other. This time we see genuine worry for her daughter and Kiriko's mother, genuine vulnerability as she is close to tears. This is what I meant earlier, notice how different she is acting when compared to before.
Maybe I shouldn't have stopped training with you, after all.
But still, it's Kiriko that takes the first step and gets the ball rolling. It's her development the short is focused on, after all. Also, remember when I mentioned that the fight made Kiriko appreciate her mother's training? This is the line that makes me think that's true.
Maybe I judged your donuts a little too harshly.
No, that's not what you're supposed to be sorry for. The donuts were the only thing you were right about.
Maybe moving home for a little while isn't such a bad idea.
Look how bashful Kiriko is here. She's being extremely vulnerable here, but this time that vulnerability is reciprocated by her mother.
That would make me so happy.
Mom, please don't cry.
And finally, the barriers are completely removed as they finally hug, and with the representative barriers, their emotional distance also disappears.
If you cry, I'm gonna cry.
Your grandma would be so proud of you.
Knowing Kiriko's background with her grandmother, this is probably the nicest thing she could have told her.
My baby is a superhero.
Yeah, if you weren't crying by now already, you're definitely now. Gosh, this short is just so good at pulling at your heartstrings. I guess we're at the end now. I hope I've been able to make you appreciate all of the little details that go into making this short so effective at what it does, and you've gained something from watching this video, even if it's just entertainment. Thank you very much for watching this far, and if you want to leave a like, comment, or subscription to tell YouTube I've worth as a person, I'd of course appreciate it. Stay delusional, and let the kitsune guide you.